My name is Jonathan Rose, and I understand you're interested in Emanuel Swedenborg, the 18th century scientist whose spiritual eyes were opened so that he could see into the spiritual world, into the afterlife. Who wouldn't be interested in Emanuel Swedenborg? It's the most fascinating story, and it's not well enough known. If you've read anything about Swedenborg, you found out pretty quickly that he wrote a lot of volumes. So the question becomes, where do I start? Well, something I would recommend for you before you even start is that you read Swedenborg's Garden of Theology. This is a volume I've recently written. It's just 96 pages long, but it intends to give you an overview of his whole thought so that wherever you are in his works, you're oriented. I framed this volume on Swedenborg's own garden. He had a beautiful garden where he lived in Stockholm. One of the large-scale features of this garden was gorgeous symmetry and order, as only the 18th century knew it. But on the small scale, his garden was full of neat little things, some of them bizarre, some of them very cool. And I see his theology as being exactly like this. So I've written this overview to get you up to speed so that you can speak about Swedenborg intelligently and be oriented when you read his works. The question still remains, where do I start? It depends on what you're interested in. His works cover a vast variety of topics, but I have some recommendations for you. If you're aiming high and you'd like to know the mind of God, that you'd like to know how creation came about, how it works, what the nature of the human mind is, I would recommend Swedenborg's Divine Love and Wisdom. This volume actually gets into the nature of the mind of God, how God is perfect love and perfect wisdom working in harmony, and how creation came about. So look through this lens. Even these flowers here are a message of love from the Creator to us. If you're interested in worldly suffering and what goes on down here on this planet, and why some people have such difficult lives and go through such horrendous things, I'd recommend to you Swedenborg's Divine Providence. This book gets into what philosophers have called the problem of evil, which is how you can have evil or any kind of suffering in a world that's run by a loving God. This book also gets into the nature of our experience and suggests that our thoughts and feelings do not actually originate in ourselves but flow into us, which gives us the chance to actually change who we are, even what type of person we are. So in an interesting way, this is also something of an 18th century self-help book before there was such a thing. If you have an interest in creation, and there's been a lot of discussion the last 100 years about creationism as opposed to evolution and so on, Swedenborg actually addresses those things, even though the concept of evolution came along after his time. He writes about that in his volume Secrets of Heaven, which is a discussion of the first 8 chapters in Genesis. Secrets of Heaven, through a close comparison of passages in the Bible, actually opens up to you the kind of code that Scripture is written in, and shows you how the creation story is actually a psychological story about the formation of your mind and your heart over time. If you're interested in some of the deep issues that are wrestled with by Christian thinkers, the nature of the Trinity, who Jesus was, what his life was, what his death was, and would like a different perspective on those than you get from some mainstream Christian sources, I would recommend that you try Swedenborg's True Christianity. This book has discussion of all these topics and more material on the nature of the Bible, but also gets into how we are to live and what a good life really is and what that contributes to our salvation. In between chapters, Swedenborg gives his spiritual experiences, and they're fascinating glimpses into another world and what the concerns are of people who are there. And if you're interested in perhaps the most overarching topic of all, our passing into the afterlife, what happens to our loved ones who die? What is life like on the other side? And are we judged by someone outside of ourselves, or are we judged on the basis of our own hearts and minds and who we've become in the course of our lives here? Swedenborg gets into all that in his most popular work, Heaven and Hell. It's Swedenborg's most popular work. A lot of people through the ages have been plagued by this idea that God sits on a mighty throne and judges you to heaven or you to hell. Swedenborg explains that that's not exactly what the Bible means, that it's actually much more a matter of what's in our own heart and our own mind and the actions that we've taken through the course of our lives that makes us comfortable in one place or another. It's a beautiful work about what happens to us after we die. Looking in the garden of Swedenborg's Theology and seeing some of the intriguing things that are within the overall order of his thought. This way you can try. If you like what you see, you can keep going. If not, it's not a big waste. But I will warn you that some people who read this material are transformed by it and changed for the better. And some become extremely passionate and read everything on the shelf, just as we love everything in this beautiful garden.